Welcome to the first episode of our podcast, Beyond the Final Whistle, with myself, Sanani Mangisa. Over the next few weeks, we'll be inviting guests, journalists, and guys who really think they were good at sport, just to banter over some sporting topics that go beyond the field. We'll tackle everything. I'm of the opinion that everything goes. Everyone just needs to bring a bit of facts to it and opinion. Join in on the conversation and tweet us. Make sure you hashtag GritSports, and then we'll answer some of your questions in the next few weeks. The water crisis down in Cape Town is very dire, but another situation down in Cape Town is that the Springboks do not have a coach yet again. Alistair Coetzee and Springbok Rugby parted ways last week, and we're going to sit down and dissect that with our panelists. Joining us tonight is seasoned journalist, veteran, I won't give away his age, Simnikiwe Xabanisa, and former Cheetahs and SA Under-21 player, Tsepo Kokwad. Alistair's out. Springboks have a new rugby coach soon. We don't know, we've heard rumours. But let's go back to Alistair slightly. He stayed out of court with SA Rugby Union. What was his number?
I'll be honest, that's obviously the most interesting thing that everybody wants to talk about. According to my work, obviously I wrote about it as well last week. There's a guy who said 4 months, and then there's a guy 4 months payout, and there's a guy who said the remainder of his contract, which would have been 23 months. And then there was also the talk that he was on 500,000 a month. So I did the maths, and 23 months would have been 11.5 million. And then obviously 4 to 6 months, as I read later from another colleague. So 3 months. Six months would have been 3 million. So my question is, if SA Rugby last year couldn't pay him 13 million, were they more willing to pay him just less than 2 million less? This, literally a year later.
Not coaching.
So I don't know. It's very confusing in terms of how to work it out from a rational perspective if you haven't got the actual figures themselves. Sure. It's just that it's tough. The one figure I got was probably closer to Alistair's people, and the other figure I got was closer to SA Rugby's people. So you just can't reconcile them. Yeah. So obviously, mainly because the misinformation, if I should call it that, is aimed at basically making sure that your organization looks a bit better off
than the other side.
In the outcome of the deal. But look, I look at it at a logical level. It would make no sense for SA Rugby to not be able to pay Alistair 13 million to walk last year. This is beginning of 2017, and suddenly be able to pay him literally roughly the same amount a whole year later. It doesn't make sense.
The slight difference would be we would go to the CCMA. It would be a long, drawn-out process. Maybe you can't employ anyone in that term while this is being drawn out. So does that come into play?
There was that talk. There was a talk simply along the lines of, the most important thing there from the CCMA, and actually they said they were going to go to the Labour Court. And the big threat was they were going to interdict SA Rugby from hiring another coach for as long as that case took on.
Goes on.
And that could have been, what, 2 years. We would have made it all the way to, probably the World Cup. We still wouldn't have a coach. And so if there's any truth to that, then maybe that's what SA Rugby was trying to that's the bullet SA Rugby was trying to dodge. But by the same token, I imagine you can't look at Alistair's record of 44% over 2 years, 11 games out of 25, and a first ever defeat to Italy, a record defeat to Ireland, and a record defeat to the All Blacks, and turn around and say SA Rugby themselves didn't have a leg to stand on.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I keep thinking the money just cannot have been as much as people think it was, but it probably wasn't as small as SA Rugby would like us to believe either.
It was, yeah.
So it's probably, the truth, as they always say, is probably somewhere in the middle. But yeah, look, both parties had a lot to lose, and both parties were under the cosh in terms of time. You look at SA Rugby, they need to hire a new coach as soon as possible. And they couldn't drag on with the court case, etc., etc. And you look at Alistair, he's got an offer on his table from by the sounds of it, from Japan, and obviously it's not going to sit around forever.
Yeah,
those guys need some kind of answer, so he needs to take it. So both parties were kind of like under pressure, and one thing everybody agreed on was that the relationship was no longer tenable, because you write an email like that to your boss, is you're gone.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen. Yeah, and also, I mean, the other guy he would have worked with, which is Erassi Erasmus, he basically said he believes he's an inferior coach or less qualified coach, and he said hiring him was basically a decision against transformation. So if you've got all those things put together, look, both parties are quite keen to get out of it.
Yeah, it was headed one way. Tsepo, let's bring you in here. We're going to touch on Rassi just now, but 2 years ago, we were full of this optimism. Here, Alistair was given the chance that we had all been waiting for him to get. Where did it actually go wrong?
Well, it actually went right for the first series. He won against Ireland. So now I thought, there was some promising things there. But I think Jake White put it quite nicely. He said, if the Bok coach will never be successful if he's in the boardroom and there's sort of no communication with him. The boardroom is running the whole show.
Yeah.
He's just dancing to to their tune. The fact that he got his job over a text message with no interview process. I mean, come on,
But here's a guy who comes in. He has an Indaba down in Durban. We're all excited. Alistair's going to shake things up a bit, and we see the first series goes well. After that, is it was run out of the boardroom, and he didn't have much say, or is this his doing?
I think he should have taken a bit more control and sort of insisted on more power and more control over his staff. I mean, he was put with Van Graan and Stick that he didn't choose. He was sort of thrown to him and told, listen, run with it. And I think that was unfair as well. I mean, if you're a coach, you want to know your assistant coach back to front and sort of be comfortable with him and sort of learning the process while you're at Bok level. I think is not ideal.
Sam, so how much say do our coaches have there?
Well, they should have a heck of a lot more. It depends who you're talking to. If you look at Heineken May, he certainly had a much bigger say than what Alistair did. I mean, essentially what they did with Heineken May, they said to him, that's what he insisted on, to choose his own people. And in choosing his own people, he basically gutted the Bulls. And he took the Bulls, a good 2 to 3 years back in terms of the expertise they had. Suddenly their head coach was Nollis Murray, who's essentially a junior coach, and that's what he's gone back to now. And they've sort of had to work their way back over the 4 years or so that it took them to fix it. They've had to work their way back to John Mitchell. It's 6 years later. Bulls are none the wiser in terms of a union. So they were afraid of that, for starters, in terms of, the coach being able to call as many people as he wanted. But by the same token, I think we underestimate the problems that Alistair got into.
Yeah.
The first is, I think he himself underestimated what the problems are. And I think a lot of Springbok coaches do. Heineken May in the first year, he thought he didn't need an open side. He didn't need an open side. And he learned the hard way that he needed one. And suddenly he had a better 2013 simply because he introduced a breakdown specialist in Richie Gray. And so that's the one thing he underestimated. Peter de Villiers, when he came in, he talked about this fluid style of playing what's in front of you. And by the end of Peter de Villiers' tenure, that team played Jake White rugby. Let's be straight about it. And so it's those things. People underestimate the problems that they're going to meet at Bok level. The problems that an Alistair walked into was, one, the Springbok team that went to the World Cup was not a handover team. No, it was a team made up of guys who were honestly, to be brutally honest, most of them shouldn't have been, and I'm talking about some big names here. A guy like Jean de Villiers shouldn't have gone to the... Granted, it's hindsight, it's 2020 vision. I can say this now because, it's 3 years from 2015, but he shouldn't have gone. Dwayne Vermeulen, big question marks over whether he should have gone because we nursed him. So what we did was we bet the whole house on players who were either sort of too soon from injury, or players who basically, were past it.
We were trying to win that Rugby World Cup.
Those were the players, those were the players we had. Suddenly there were retirements en masse. no more of those players. Suddenly you haven't got senior players, and you now have to create the whole thing by yourself. And then, in the meantime, the other thing that happened was South Africa had this new problem of French clubs, Japanese clubs, just basically, and UK clubs, just taking the talent below the most experienced people. And so what you had was a situation where there was a lot of problems within the system that nobody was picking. And the other problem was there was no money in SA Rugby. I think they'd just been dumped by ABSA.
Yeah.
And so if you want a squad as big as a coaching squad as big as Heineken Meijers, you're not going to get it because there's no money to pay for those people. And so I think those are the problems he walked into, and he didn't quite identify them as quickly as he could have. And by the time he did, I think it was too late.
It's a bit of a problem because now we sit with a situation that, yes, Alistair's out, but there's a Springbok coach that's going to inherit that team. Is the future looking bright? And whoever that Springbok coach is, I know, Tsepo, you can come in here. The guy earmarked and rumoured to be coaching next. You worked under him a little bit.
Yeah, I think it will be Rassie. I think he actually needs to take the reins now. I think he's been hiding behind sort of directorship a bit too much. If he's got the skills, he needs to show up. He needs to step up and show us what he can do with the team. I've always believed in South African rugby, and I always will. I mean, we've got plenty of talent here. I just think it's about getting the right structures in place and getting the right game plan as well. I think we're playing a very old-fashioned game, and we're playing. I think we're at least 3 or 4 years behind New Zealand in terms of game plans, and that's because of our professional sort of difference in professional franchise rugby. Yeah, because in Cape Town they play a certain way, in Durban they play a certain way, the Bulls play a certain way, and then when you get all those guys together and expect them to play one way, when you're under pressure, you're always going to go back to what you know.
What you know, for sure. But going with Rassie, if a few weeks time we hear the Springbok coach is Rassie, are we going slightly backwards, or is he our guy?
Look, in terms of Rassie's thinking as a rugby mind, there's a phrase I've overused for the last 10 years or so, which is, his mind has never seen the inside of the box. So he's literally one of those guys that thinks outside the box. Yeah. It's great, but I've got no doubt that Rassie Erasmus is a good coach. The question marks I have are very simple. At sort of head coach level, Rassie's won one Currie Cup in 2005, which was the first Cheetahs since in 29 years, and the second one was the shared one with the Bulls in 2006. And since then, he then went to the Stormers, missed the playoffs, I think, by a point in 2008. And then he went to directorship. So the big question mark for me, that's why when Alistair says he believes, Rassie is a lesser qualified coach, that's the lines along which he's talking. I don't necessarily think he's saying, he's less of a thinker. So that's fine, but the question mark then is, how comfortable is Rassie in the front line? Because from what I understand, Rassie, when it gets hot, he likes to leave.
He's a man to answer that.
He's one of those guys who doesn't like the media's, he doesn't like interrogation by the media and or the public. And we have to admit, the Springbok job is got to be the worst when it comes to, basically sideshows. It's literally sideshow. And so you're almost going to spend a lot of your time dealing with things you shouldn't be dealing with as a coach. And if in the past he hasn't been very happy with those things, how's he suddenly going to be good at it? And look, I mean, I'll let Tsepo answer, whether he thinks he's the guy to do that. But the other thing I want to address is his hiring. Because that on its own is another big thing to talk about. But, Tsepo can...
But as he was talking about the hiring, I think the same process as Jake White was saying, there has to be an interview process. There has to be other players, other coaches given a chance. International coaches, we haven't looked outside of our borders, in a long time. I think we haven't once.
You do need to check.
A foreign
you do need to check if you opened it up to everyone who you would get, because you might be pleasantly surprised. If every
Graham
man,
Henry had to,
if every under 14A coach applies for it, then you can walk away and you can choose whoever you want simply based on there was nobody there. But if it's someone who's got gravitas in international rugby, it would be criminal not to do that. And remember, Rassie was brought to us as a director of rugby and not as a head coach. If he gets hired, well, which he should, because they haven't got enough time to go through any process until the end of February, the shortest month in the year. So what I'm saying is, if he does get hired, or when he does get hired, what happens to the directorship? Do we in South Africa live in a place where we have this role that constantly doesn't get nobody?
No one gets
it's constantly in limbo. He left it. Well, it wasn't exactly the same thing, but he left it 2 years ago, and it was kept for him. And he comes back, and they give it to him, but now they give him the head coach job for the next 2 years, which means they have to keep it for him because that's where he wants to go back in the end. If you can get, it's nice work if you can get it. And frankly, if SA Rugby are happy to do work that way, if they're happy to go through their processes that way, then they should be happy with the results. It's really that simple. I'm not saying Rassie's not going to be able to, but will Rassie be able to be director of rugby, look after everything and look after the Springboks?
Judging from that, I was a little bit pessimistic with what's going on around Springbok rugby, but the two gents are very excited and very optimistic about what Rassie Erasmus can bring. Share your comments with us on that topic. Don't forget to tweet us and hashtag GridSports. I reckon the Blitzboks have made some good finals, but they just can't get it over the line in one or two of the finals that they've made. Guys, we've seen these guys make finals. They're one of the best rugby products we have. The team culture is great. The team vibe, you can see. What goes on in those last final games? There's a bit of fatigue. Are the guys just not used to winning as a habit? Cliche?
You're talking about the last 2 seasons, or you're talking about
exactly?
just the
You're talking about the last two
Yeah.
tournaments.
Because if you look at last season, yes, they made something like eight finals and won 5, and out of 10, that's pretty good.
That's good. Okay.
And so if you look at this year, it's been 4 tournaments. They've made 3 finals. 3 finals, won 1, lost 2, and semi-finals. The reason I think they don't always kick on, the very basic reason for me is, for starters, you have to look at the fact that Sevens is very competitive.
For sure.
You know, Fiji are still a very good team on their day. They're tough to beat, as we saw this past weekend. If you look at England have had the wood on us. If you look at the Aussies, they're coming through. If you look at, we lost to Scotland last season sometime. And so it's quite competitive. You never quite know who's going to beat you. And so as a result, my theory as far as the Blitzboks would be, you know what, I've got no problems with them making the final, simply because it means they are in a position to win it. Yeah. Whether they do or not is, I don't want to say it's neither here nor there, because obviously we'd like to see them win. But by the same token, if they are in the final consistently in 3 out of 4, what that means is they're in exactly the position they're in now, which is they're leading the series, even though they haven't won absolutely everything. Also, you've got to look at the season. The season is in its entirety. There are 3 things at stake for them. The first is they want to defend their title, and the second is they want to win the Commonwealth Games gold,
sure.
And the third one is they want that World Cup, which just refuses, to fall right for them. So if you look at those 3 things, I think they're doing okay in terms of sort of being thereabouts. The big question marks are whether being in enough finals is going to get them to win, to get their defeats right.
But that's the armchair critic in South Africa sits and goes, these guys are making all the finals. We want them to win all the finals.
So I'm just saying, look, you've got to be there.
Winner gets 22 points.
The season
runner-up gets 19 points. Yeah, so you're in the final. If you're in the final, you're getting the points.
Okay.
I think that's what I think all coaches are just trying to get to the final. And
the World Series final.
On the final, anyone's day. I think they've just been unlucky the last few couple of tournaments, and I think they've got a lot of injuries coming through. Chris Dry was a huge player for them.
Yeah,
so they're struggling with the size as well. They don't have big players that are experienced enough. Frankie Horn left last year or 2 years ago. Chris Dry out now. Carl Brown's come back. Philip Snyman's just gone now as well.
We're going to see the guys go to Super 15, back to Super 15, Noche.
They're going to lose Bacher, they're going to lose Noche, they're going to lose Sinatla. Is there anybody else? I'm trying to think.
With the injuries that we've mentioned and those guys dropping out, should we be worried, or they've got enough depth there?
Look, in the past, I mean, they basically won the series without those guys.
Sure.
So if that's the case, then it shouldn't be an issue. Look, they work quite hard at their structures, as in at their depth. You know, they've got this academy side that they, you know, that basically trains with the main team. It's also, I mean, I think the one thing, if you could look at a criticism, the Sevens team is almost where the 2007 World Cup side was in 2011, which is
nicely,
they kind of like they're just getting old now. Those guys have been there for quite a while, and you know you get to a point. Sevens is a very robust game. It's a quick man's game, and it's a and you know, the older you get, you're not if you look at a guy like South Africa, he's still a gem, but you can see they play more and more geduld in the playmaker role or Roscoe Speckman, because they obviously they're thinking about the future, and they're thinking about their options. And so, I mean, if I could have a criticism, I think the guys are getting some of the guys, not all of them, are getting a bit long in the tooth. Yeah.
On the coaching side of Sevens, we've seen Vuyozanga go to Germany. Is he someone who could have kept in the system for future purposes, or looked into the future, go, that could be a guy after Neil Powell? Or are we happy to let him fly for now and then hopefully come back home?
I think personally, it's good for Vuyo. I think he needs to go out there, spend a couple of years on his own, and sort of start a culture there on his own and build his own team, experience, and he'll come back a better player. I mean, a better coach.
I 100% agree with Seppo, but I would add one more thing. You said, should we have kept him close? Well, we've kept Neil Powell close. We've kept Renfred Dazel close. We've kept Paul Delport close. He's now coaching the women. And we've kept Mario Skuman close. So why not Vuyo? That would be my question.
We've seen some great cricket come out of the Proteas versus India series. And I'm going to touch a little bit about the Proteas, because there's been a few question marks around a few players. Is it just injuries, or should we be concerned about the Proteas? Gentlemen?
Look, right here, right now, I'm probably the least concerned of the people watching them, simply because before the series started, Faf du Plessis said they're thinking about the World Cup. You know, it's 18 months out from the World Cup, and they're actively thinking about the World Cup. Apparently, he says in the time he's been involved, they've never thought about the World Cup that far out, which may explain why we then kept winning series leading up to the World Cup, and then not being able to do it. So if the World Cup is a plan, I would like to think they're going to do World Cup specific things, and the most important of those things is, for me, is the fact that you need to introduce new players. And that's like right here, right now. So it doesn't matter who you're playing, because the real issue with South African teams at World Cups has always been pressure. So I don't think, wherever Otis Gibson is sitting and thinking, oh, this is great, we're losing to India. We're now losing the one days to India. But in terms of what he wants, which is to get the team, whoever is in the team, to work under pressure at all times and to try and deliver it, he's certainly got that. And it's been assisted by injuries to AB de Villiers, Faf du Plessis, Quinton de Kock. It's been aided by that. But what it does do also is that it encourages us to get the next tier of guys, because that's the other thing. If it doesn't matter whether you like AB or not, it doesn't matter whether you like Faf or not, it doesn't matter whether you like Kashim Amla or not, or Dale Steyn. All those players, they're all great players, but they're all missing one thing in their careers, which is a World Cup, which basically means they're all going to want to go to the World Cup. Yeah. It then means it puts you in a situation. I mean, if you look at Amla will be about, I think, 36 when he goes to the World Cup. Imran Tahir is going to be 40 at the World Cup. You look at AB. AB is now playing all the formats for South Africa. Again, he's back there again. He's not going to miss the IPL. Yeah, and sure. What that means in English is that, will he have lost the hunger that he's shown? Because for me, from a guy watching at a distance who doesn't know him from a bar of soap, it looks like he's a guy that thrives on sort of having a backwards step, just a bit of a breather, and then so he won't have that opportunity leading up to the World Cup. You look at Faf is starting to have weird injuries. Granted, a finger injury in cricket is a finger injury, but there was that weird back seizing up, And so you do have to introduce Makram as your potential new captain because, well, he's been earmarked as that guy for the whole time. So why wait? We didn't wait with Graham Smith. Granted, it took a lot of time. But what I'm saying is we've got all these players who are great and they want to underline their legacy with the World Cup. And at the end of the day, it's going to be Otis's really hard decision to make, which is which ones get to go and which ones don't get to go. Remember, I'll remind you again, 2015. We all banked on Jacques Kallis going. He promised that he'd quit tests and he stayed in the 1 days and he said he was going. A year before, suddenly he wasn't going. And you know what? We've had a number 7 problem since then. Still hasn't been fixed. Sure. And so what I'm saying is if you sit and you put all your eggs in these older player basket, you are asking for trouble. Because those guys are at that age where you just can't be sure. It's a bit like Arsene Wenger used to do at Arsenal. The moment you turn 30, 1 year rolling contracts because you can't trust you
bank on the older guys.
Yeah,
sure.
So it's one of those.
I've got a different sort of perspective. If you look at when we beat them in the test series, right? And how can it over a 2-week period be that bad? It clearly shows us how good India is at the 1 day game. They've played more than us in the last sort of eight months to a year. They're Kohli, Shikhar Dhawan, those are exceptional players, and with the extended IPL that they play, sort of T20s, they get no fear factor. They go after the bowlers. Can we be that good in 18 months? That's my question. Can we catch up to India, who is clearly setting the bar? And we're going to see now in a couple of months when Australia comes, are we going to be on par with them, or we still have to be working towards?
So besides the injuries we need to look at, are we a step behind India? Are we 2 steps behind them?
You know what? If we are a step behind India 18 months from the World Cup, I'm happy.
For sure.
All I don't want is for us, if you go into a World Cup, look, in rugby it was different. I'm not going to pretend I know what it is for cricket. If you go into a rugby World Cup, what you need is basically, about 30 caps to your advantage. So you count the games you've got and you look at the guys you want to give an opportunity, and I suspect guys like Vian Mulder are going to be part of that, and guys like Kaya Zondo and so on and so on and so on. All those guys are going to be part of that. And all those guys, you have to give them sufficient game time to get them to the point where you know what they can do. And in 18 months' time, when you know what they can do, what that is either no, he hasn't got what it takes to work at this level, or he's got the ability to win your World Cup.
So in that team that played the other day, who were the new players? It was only Kaya Zondo.
And
Markram's new. The rest is old. They've been there, done it.
Well, that's why you need. So
that's exactly. Are they going to blood play? Are they blooding players?
In the next game, we've got Heinrich Klaassen, who's going to replace Quinton de Kock.
Yeah.
That's another new player you need to have a look at. And I mean, if you look at a guy like Upeshugayo, somebody needs to pull him aside and say to him, "Hey, have a close look at Ben Stokes. How hard he works to be an effective all-rounder both ways, which is with the ball and the bat." And somebody needs to say, look, you're a big, strong boy, but you need to be a big, strong, fit boy so that you can deliver at all times. And so it's all those things. 18 months gives you time to buy that. Look, I know that the real issue most South Africans are having is, look, you need promising that you're going to come right by World Cup. It's happened with our rugby so many times that people are like, no, we're not going down this path again. But what I'm saying is people are looking at it, people are saying, well, but this messes with the oldest thing in sport, which is you've got to focus on the here and the now. But by the same token, if you're not planning for the future, what are you doing?
What are you doing, for sure? I think we can both agree then, all 3 of us, that we don't need to panic just yet. We've still got 18 months till World Cup, but we should see the system producing the younger players, letting them play and making sure that we win series too. And I think at the end of the day, the Indian series will be good for us, and then we look at the Australian series of where we're at.
What I like is it's tough cricket all the way through, and if it's tough cricket, that's all you can ask for as a young player, because you're not being lied to. You're not playing against Bangladesh. You're not playing against Zimbabwe. Ask Aiden Makram, he'll tell you it's tougher cricket than his start. He had a dream start, and yes, he's had a 90 against India, which is good. which shows that he's got what it takes. But it's been harder for the runs to come, and that's the pressure you need to put these guys under. Not a situation where guys labours under, scores 1,000 runs in domestic cricket, and then he thinks it's just gonna translate into international. It's not gonna happen.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we don't need to panic about the Proteas just yet. They might not win the India series, but they'll definitely come good later on. The Premier League is considered one of the toughest leagues in the world, yet we've got a team that's 13 points ahead of the pack. I'm not sure this bodes well for the league, but we're going to touch base on that with our guests. Joining us to dissect the state of the Premier League and to look back on the transfer season is Coach BT, Batando Ntsebeza, and Andile Gogwen, who considers himself a football pundit. Gents, should we just give it to them?
I think we can. The 13 points, there's only a few games left. I think the league's been over since City beat Manchester United at Old Trafford. I think it was early December. I guess the reality is it's either even if they implode or self-destruct, the reality is everyone else who's chasing then has to be perfect. Manchester United will have to go on an unbeaten run, even go as far as to win every single game, because I think there's very few teams that can deal with City on the average day in the Premier League, so they're not going to drop too many points.
So it's safe to say that their lead is, drop 3 or 4 points here and your lead is good enough to win you the title.
Exactly. And they still have to play the likes of Manchester United, they still have to play the likes of Chelsea again, so it's not as though that they can't actually take points from the other teams as well. So like I say, I think everyone else has to be almost perfect to stand any chance, and City has to self-destruct or implode for there to be any opportunity for anyone else to win this Premier League.
So the Premier League, then, we're looking at who's coming second, third and fourth in those Champions League spots.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I still like to think Manchester United have got enough to finish second, but I think the pressure is coming from Liverpool, Spurs. Chelsea are starting to go off the boil a little bit, but certainly Liverpool and Spurs probably look more likely to challenge Manchester United for second.
With that Spurs team, they're getting a few good results, chasing Liverpool, chasing Chelsea. Chelsea have got a slight problem. There's rumours of Conte being out, change room uncertainty. Do you think they'll finish top 4?
At this stage, they're gonna have to arrest the slide. I mean, they've conceded 7 goals in 2 games against Bournemouth at home. I think they shipped 4 yesterday to Watford. So unless they arrest the slide, they won't finish in the top 4.
It's quite interesting. It's going to be a tough one for the owners. I think let's just touch back on Man City. We said they're 13 points clear. They've spent a lot of money in the transfer season, before the season started and in the mid-break season. Is it justifiable when you look at where they're sitting? Can you say we're happy with the money we spent because we're 13 points clear?
I think if you had to analyse a season where it is now, for the money that they've spent, I think they've got to be happy with the position that they're in. They're top of the league with a 13-point gap to the next team. They're still in the Champions League. They're still in the FA Cup, and they are going to be playing in the League Cup final. So you spend the money that you spend to add depth to the squad so that you can compete across 4 different competitions. So I think at this stage, Manchester City would be happy with their investment.
But then does that become the battle of the checkbook? Because if you can keep dishing it out, then we keep buying the right players, or is it a balance between what Pep's doing with the checkbook?
I think to your point, it's the second bit. It's what you do with the money. I think there's many clubs in the Premier League that do have quite a big budget. Manchester United have spent a lot of money, but one would question whether the players that Mourinho has brought in have made the same impact that the players that Pep Guardiola has certainly brought in. They started at the same time, which is quite interesting, but quite clearly for me, I think Pep Guardiola has put Mourinho in the shade a little bit, especially this season. And therefore, you'd have to say that their return on investment is a lot higher than Manchester United's return on investment at this stage in time.
Guys, it's Feb, and who's had the better of the transfer season? Looking at the teams now, we've had a few rounds after January. Who's looking good?
If you look at, let's start with the Arsenal perspective. Arsenal, obviously, they had that whole Sanchez thing hanging over their heads, and clearly Sanchez didn't want to play the season. And if now in replacement of Sanchez there is Mkhitaryan, so that is very good business from Arsenal's point of view, is that they have someone who now wants to play.
And you let go of a player who just didn't want to be in the change room.
Yes, who was more like a passenger, if you would, because being world class, you would expect Sanchez to, his numbers in the league, goal scoring numbers, don't say that as a world class player. It's not because he's not world class; it's because he didn't want to play.
Where's the flip in that? As an athlete, do you become a passenger because you want to leave? Or are you frustrated and then that translates to your performances? Where's performances because I'm going to dish out half-hearted because I want to leave, so sell me, or I'm dishing out half-hearted because I'm unhappy?
At that level, you find that the margins are very, so any slight distraction can affect a player. So in the case of Sanchez, you have 1 year, you have less than a year left in your contract. You don't know where the club is going, so those small things, when you play against a team now that's at a level on your level and higher, those small things can be a deciding factor. So you find that Sanchez, he played the way he played this season for Arsenal because he had two men. His mind wasn't clear, and
will he flourish at under Mourinho?
He will flourish. Obviously, like now he has a new lease in life. But I mean that's now Mourinho's problem.
Okay.
So
I'd like to weigh in on that. I think there's two ways you can look at it. I think there's someone like a Philippe Coutinho as an example, quite clearly wanted to go to Barcelona, but the chance never materialized in the winter transfer season. But if you look at his numbers, and so certainly from an output perspective, they were just as good as his previous season for the same period of time, if not even better. So I guess there's an example of a player who decided, you know what, I can't get my move to Barcelona right now. I'm just going to put my head down, I'm going to knuckle down, and I'm going to continue to play. And I guess the opportunity presented itself now in January, and he's got his dream move. But it was off the back of, I guess the separation was not the same as Sanchez. I think a lot of Liverpool fans don't have any hard feelings towards Philippe Coutinho, whereas I know a lot of Arsenal fans, they want to see Sanchez.
So I think, going back to that point, it now depends on the player, his level of professionalism.
To turn it around.
So if I remember correctly, Ronaldo as well, he stayed one more season.
Yes.
And the performances that he gave United were
just as good.
Cool. Giroud to Chelsea? Good move, bad move?
It's good business for Arsenal. To not get rid of a player like that, but Arsenal won't miss Giroud.
But have Chelsea got a good player then?
They won't get the best. I think he's also past he's over 30 now, so he is declining. So for Chelsea's point of view, it's more like a quick fix.
Yes.
Because obviously they have that striking crisis.
Problem.
So I think if you look at the January transfer window, Chelsea were being linked with everyone from Peter Crouch to pretty much any striker that was playing in the Premier League or even available. Chelsea were linked with that striker. And I think it had a lot to do with the fact that, they put all of their eggs in one basket, which was Alvaro Morata. He's not a bad player at all. He's actually a very good player. But I think first season in the Premier League, he's only 24.
He just needs
at
to
a
figure
lot
out
of the clubs, exactly. Well, I guess at a lot of the clubs that he was at, he was never really the first choice striker.
Okay.
So I think I saw a stat recently where he's already played more minutes this season than he has in any other season in his career. So I think the burnout is taking its toll, and I think also the additional responsibility, because for many months Chelsea couldn't look to anyone else. They just had him.
It's a responsibility that comes with a few million pounds, man.
And he's their record signing. So, when you get signed for 75 million, the reality is you have to deliver the goods. And I think that's where Chelsea have been struggling. And that's why someone like Giroud, for them, is additional. I guess he's got Premier League experience. So they might see it as a good signing. But I question it because they let go of Diego Costa. And now they're signing Olivier Giroud. I think the quality between the two is worlds apart, and that's why you're seeing the actual slump that Chelsea are going through at the moment.
Right, we'll see where those guys will end up at the end of the season. Our guys seem to think the battle is really in the positions 2, 3, and 4. Let's bring it back to a bit of a local perspective now. We had a great game this last weekend in Sundowns versus Cape Town City. And we saw an impressive goal being scored there. And what do you guys think of it?
For me, first of all, the scoreline, 1-0. We've had too many of those here in the PSL, especially this season. The goal itself was quality. Percy Tau's run was, great run, great improvisation when it got to the byline, and a great finish from Kama Billiat. But I feel that our matches should have more goals in them.
Yeah, for sure. So is that a little bit of a striker problem, which we know we have in the country? Sheiks Mashaba has highlighted it. A few of the other coaches have said we've genuinely got a striker problem. Is that because of the style of football we're playing, or is it something that we genuinely need to be concerned about?
There's many factors when it comes to, the one thing we always talk about is development. So if you look at the strikers, for example, finishing is practice.
Sure.
Finishing is in Europe. The goal that Salah scored against Spurs.
Impressive goal.
If you notice there, he didn't even have his eyes on the goals. Because now it's muscle memory.
Yeah.
He's done that over and over.
He saw the keeper come out and he just basically chipped it over the keeper.
So you find, if with our structures, you find that our players only get that top quality coaching when they're 17. But below that, they only practice in an amateur setup.
So it's too late by then. We're training at a late stage.
Yeah. So that's one factor. Another factor is the tactics that are employed by the coaches. Often coaches they don't want to lose in the PSL. So which is why we end up having lots of draws
and goalless draws at that. If we look at the season in the PSL, we've got a lot of movement. You can win 2 games now and be at the top of the league. So with that in mind, who are you guys seeing 1 and 2, call it position 1 and 2, winning the league or coming thereabouts?
Yeah, I guess after this weekend, it's very hard to look beyond Sundowns. Cape Town City are kind of the new boys, so they're doing quite well to be sitting in second. But I think that's where Sundowns will have an advantage over them because they've won leagues before. You know what I mean? They've been in these high pressure situations. Pito Musamane, one of the most successful local coaches of all time. You know what I mean? I think Sundowns will have more than enough about them to see it through in comparison to a Cape Town City.
Could we see Pirates sneak in and just they going about their business on the
Pirates
side?
Pirates have been playing some good football. I've seen a few of their games recently. They really have turned a corner. But again, I don't see them having the consistency that a Sundowns has. So, like I mentioned, they won last weekend, but the game before that they lost. But before that, I think they won the previous 3 or 4. But I think you need to win 6 games in a row for them to I guess start to put pressure on Sundowns.
And adding to that point about consistency in the PSL, it's hard to be consistent when, as a team, you don't score more than 2 goals, which is why we're in the situation.
What's our top goal scorer sitting at the moment?
Rama Galela sitting on 9 goals. 9 goals is whole.
9 too little.
Yeah, no, that's But that's become the standard in the PSL, and I don't want to criticize too much. But over the past, I guess 5-6 seasons, there hasn't really been anyone who's prolific. So the problem has become a national problem now. It's no longer just about specific clubs. There is no single person in the PSL that is prolific that you can say for sure that if he gets a chance, he's going to score. You don't get that.
Some vets is coming on and still scoring goals.
No, that tells you that the problem is.
That's where the problem lies there.
Siabo Nomvet is over 40 now, so the fact that he's still one of the names that are being mentioned as goal scorers tells you all you need to know about the problem that we're facing in the PSL, especially from a goals perspective.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap up for this week. Be sure to join us next week as we tackle more topics on Beyond the Final Whistle. Add to the conversation. Make sure you tweet us and #@GritSports.